Okay.
We ready to rock and roll?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got a question.
Okay, well, where did Philip go? Oh, there you are. Okay, you got a quick one first?
Quick one first. House Bill 1403, it is an exact match cross-file to Senate Bill 636. This was the, in the wait, the wait list bill from Senator Zucker.
Oh, right.
Finance is secondary, so.
Okay, we're just,
1403.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, let's dig in on this 406.
So House Bill 406, you should have a reprint on your desk. Got some amendments we've done based on the discussion yesterday and some follow-up conversations with some of the relevant stakeholders. So if you turn to page 3, this piece is generally going to be in JPR's jurisdiction, so I think they'll decide on the ultimate policy. However, there was kind of a feature of this just on its face that was creating kind of a circular situation. And so if you look at lines 26, it's just clarifying language that, as written, it was codifying a standard of getting a psych or psychological evaluation within 48 hours. But it had in this provision, line 26, it was conflicting because it was saying if there was an ALJ decision, that would preclude the admission. And so the idea here is to, if the ALJ decision is based on the same information being presented in one, and that should avoid the circularity between those two. Again, JPR will ultimately decide on the policy issue here is JPR, but this should fix the issue of those provisions confusing each other.
Okay. By the way, just, so I know we have somebody from the Hospital Association. Who else is here with us?
DHS.
DHS.
And Dave Romans.
And Mr. Romans, who we've been talking to about the money aspects of it. And if there's a point that we need to jump in with any of you, we're glad you're here. Thank you.
So turning to page 5 of the reprint, lines 24 and 25, this paragraph's being struck. It's confusing, and I haven't been able to confirm with anybody that it needs to be in here. So really the issue surrounding this is that you have children in hospital settings that there's a medical determination they don't need to be there, and that's really the crux of it. So this piece about, in paragraph 1, lines 24 and 25 is not necessary. Going down, lines 28, this is requirements. This is not new. These are requirements as the House sent them over to establish, once the child starts getting connected with the facility, to start the placement planning, and then doing some follow-up on page 6. Page 6, starting on line 14, these are new requirements specifying that the 2 departments are required to provide beds necessary to accommodate the children requiring medical admission or treatment.
So when you say new requirement, this is something that we're adding in?
No,
I didn't think so.
No. Lines 14 through 21 are as passed by the House.
Okay.
And then new requirement that it's new law.
Yep.
Lines 22 through 25, just some clarifying language. As this came over from the House, it was establishing basically a cause of action for failure to provide admission or treatment. And the clarification here is that it's provide admission or treatment in the least restrictive environment, which is what other requirements in the bill are proposing rather than, the issue was kids were being kept in the hospital. But I think the intent here was that they need to be provided the appropriate care. Lines 26 through 31, in speaking with the departments, there was some concern that the terminology prevailing Medicaid rates was confusing. And so that's being stricken, and so the requirement here is just that Department of Health or Department of Human Services is required to pay the hospital, emergency facility, or inpatient facility for any admission beyond the medical determination.
Could I ask a question?
Yes?
How would they figure out how much to pay?
I believe there are some current arrangements in place for payment. I have not gotten anything indicating what some
Could we
more
ask the
specific
Yeah,
language
I
would
hear
be.
I see head shaking. So anybody come on up, yeah. Whoever can,
So what is specifically the question? Do we currently pay the hospitals, and how is that determined?
what the amount is, how are the amounts?
The bill says that somebody has to be paid, shall pay the hospital, emergency facility, or inpatient for these kids, but doesn't say how much they'd be paid, or how to determine how they'd be paid in the draft.
Right, and so currently, we have a policy that essentially says we work with the hospital to reimburse them. It's based on a methodology, but it's anywhere between 92 to 97% of what is billed for the inpatient stay is what we reimburse the hospitals.
So it's a little bit less than 100% of what would be billed for inpatient
For
treatment center.
inpatient, and then there's also something called an administrative daily rate that MTH has released policy on as well.
If I ask one other question? And the reason this is in the bill, maybe this isn't a question for you, maybe for Philip, is because you are not doing that now, and you
We
can't.
are.
So what is the relationship between
My understanding is that this is codifying
existing practice?
existing practice. And so part of the reason for striking the reference to prevailing Medicaid rates is that's not something that's, at least as I've been informed, that's something that's part of the existing practice, and we didn't want to alter what was currently going on.
That leads to a third question. I thought part of the rationale for the bill was the hospitals weren't getting paid for this, but you're saying the hospitals are getting paid for this.
Yes, I can confirm they are.
My questions conclude.
So they are, but there's uncertainty as to whether or not it's required that they have to? Is that accurate?
So I will say this. So this may be DHS policy, but from our members, we have heard that in practice, this is not necessarily happening. Hospitals are getting that Medicaid administrative day rate because these children are almost always, or I should say always, because we're talking about foster youth, they are in the Medicaid program. So the Medicaid program, while the stay is medically necessary, will pay the Medicaid rates for the services provided. After the child is deemed no longer medically necessary, Medicaid will only pay that Medicaid day rate and will ignore every other service that is provided to the child. So I can't speak to exactly what DHS policy is, but that is not trickling down to the hospital's billing departments.
Well, what's the difference between the numbers? I mean, what's the delta for one rate versus the other rate?
So the Medicaid day rate is approximately, I believe, and I would need to check this with Medicaid, but it's an extremely nominal fee. The last time I heard, it was about $125 per day.
And the other fee? The other rate?
So that's interesting. I saw a policy as recently as maybe 2 weeks ago that said the daily administrative fee was $400 a day. But the other methodology that we use, like I said, it's reimbursed at anywhere between 92 to 97% of the per diem inpatient rate, depending on the provider.
I'm still confused, I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand one rate is X and one rate is X minus something. So I'm trying to figure out how much money we're talking about. Anybody know?
So it's really going to depend on the complexity of the child and the
Get it.
services that are provided. I can find out for you, if that would be helpful in a very short order, you know, what the typical daily services provided to a typical child in this situation. I think I have some members of my team listening right now who could probably go and try and find that out. But, you know, if the day rate has been increased to $400, that is wonderful. But that is still, you know, that could be thousands of dollars off from the services that are actually provided to these kids.
Okay, but that then relates, Philip, back to the language in the draft. All it says is that they will be paid, and unless there's some other provision in here, it doesn't relate to what they're gonna be paid, so it seems like the bill, this provision doesn't really do anything.
No, I think you're
Because of the
exactly right.
confusion around what is actually going on,
Right?
doing anything more specific without knowing exactly what that is risks cutting something off or enhancing something that's not a current obligation.
I don't disagree with that, but if we're trying to help solve the problem here, I think we need a little more clarity.
Sarah Alford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it would have been really helpful had the department been here at the hearing, number one. Number two, from my understanding of the issue, it's, the daily rate's one thing, but the hospitals are also providing the clinicians, the psychologists, the social workers, those services are not being covered by DHS. But we don't have an understanding of average cost of just how many, because obviously that's gonna be very variable. But does the Hospital Association have a suggestion for us on that?
Yeah, that's correct, Senator Elfrith, and I should have introduced myself, Erin Dorian from the Maryland Hospital Association. You know, what we have seen other states have done is they, particularly, I believe it was Minnesota or Missouri, passed a bill similar to this, where their equivalent of the Department of Human Services set up a program or, you know, a regulatory structure where the hospitals could bill DHS. And whatever you know, if it was 97% or, you know, whatever that arrangement would be, that was set up in a regulatory structure from the Department of Human Services.
Okay. And you answered my other question, which is what are other states doing? So thank you.
Ready to move on?
All right, at the bottom of page 6, there is new language about hospital, emergency facility, or inpatient facilities being required to provide certain information to the Maryland Department of Health. This would be information related to the children that are admitted following determination that the hospitalization was not required. And then on the bottom of page 6, moving on to page 7, particulars for that information. And then on page 7, this new paragraph 4 that is related to paragraph 3, this specifies that MDH or DHS may deny payment if a facility fails to provide the information required but under paragraph 3. And so I would note that you may want to look at this because, again, if the idea is to codify existing practice, I don't know to what extent this feature would create a new component to those compensation practices.
Fine. This provision just says you don't get paid if you don't provide the report, right?
Right, but the requirement to provide the report is a new requirement.
Okay.
And so I'm just,
What's the problem?
well, I'm just flagging for you that
Flagging it.
this is a new feature of the flow of the compensation. So, new requirement for report gets missed, report doesn't happen, the departments can now deny payment.
mean, that doesn't strike me as a big deal. If providing the report seems like a reasonable thing to require.
It's part of the bill as we received it.
This is new from,
Oh, this is the new,
this is the new from MDH.
okay,
Oh,
gotcha.
oh, I see, okay.
Package.
Thank you.
Is there a distinction?
Mr. Chair,
there-
may I comment?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's reasonable for a hospital that's billing for services to provide some of this information and, you know, to report to the agencies. Number 5 and 6 seem, or, I'm sorry, 6 and 7 seem a little bit off to me, because the reason that the child is continued to be hospitalized is because the agencies haven't found a place for the child. So I don't know how the hospital would be providing that information to the agencies when it's the agencies that are trying to make the placement and have the detailed reasons.
And that's always the reason you're suggesting? There's never any,
No, for a child that's in state custody, the reason that is known to the hospital staff most frequently is that the state has not been able to find placement for the child.
yeah.
Can I ask the department that? I mean, do you have a different view or a similar view on that?
No, I think that's more or less correct. I would just say, oftentimes it is the department who is very vigilantly looking for
Yeah.
placement, but it simply does not exist.
Right.
That resource does not exist for that child, given their specific therapeutic milieu.
Right, I mean, the implication is that there's not a need to require that from the hospital, because the hospital, there's no information.
Okay, so maybe we just strike 6 and 7.
Okay.
Okay? So, Philip, if you could, I know this might be a little challenging, but with each thing that you mentioned, just mention whether it was in the original.
Yes.
Not the original bill, but the bill.
As it came from the House.
As it came from the House, or
Yes.
if it's something that you've come up with as you've been working on this. And first off, thank you too. You worked really hard in the last 24 hours to help us get to a better place on this, so.
Yes, and if it's italicized, that'll be one tell. If it's italicized, this is.
Because like this
center.
wasn't, right, italicized?
This is italicized, yeah, so
Italicized,
bottom of
yeah.
page 6 onto page 7, that's italicized. Bottom of page 7, hand numbered page 7, not italicized, this subsection E, that was as it came over from the House. This is creating, codifying a standard that, a child is placed in the least restrictive environment available.
Okay,
Top of hand mark page 8, lines 3 through 8, this would be in the Senate, your amendments before you. Striking this provision, this, if you recall, was a provision that was creating a liability shield related to the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And I have talked to a conversation with Public Defender's Office and then some other stakeholders, and confirm what I said yesterday, that state law can't really create an exemption to a federal action. And there's also a concern that this language would create different standards for foster kids compared to kids who are non-foster kids. So that language is being stricken there. Lines 9 through 14 requires notification to the Office of the Public Defender. This was, the significance of this is that when the Office of Public Defender will act as the advocate for the children in need of assistance, and so providing them the notification creates more assurance that they will be able to step in when needed to advocate for a
And
child.
this was in the bill, or this is?
This was in the bill originally.
Okay, fine.
Lines 15 through 24, this came over from the House. This is requiring the governor to appoint somebody to coordinate between the various departments, and then also to notify the Public Defender's Office of the placements again. So this is a
is
coordination
this
effort.
person a new person, and is it paid for?
I believe this would be a new person. I don't know what the funding implications would be. I don't know if Dave has any.
Do you have an opinion of that? The department have an opinion of that?
So I agree with council's assessment. It's not really clear to me either whether this would be a new person or whether this is a position that could be satisfied with an existing position, perhaps in, for example, the governor's office, Office of Crime, Youth, and Victim Services. I think I got that right. But that was a question we had as well, is who would this person be?
There's no funding for it?
I don't know if Dave wants to weigh in. There's nothing in the bill specifying.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any money specifically in the budget for such a PIN. Now, as you know, there's a tremendous number of vacant positions across state government and all of these agencies, so it's certainly very easy for them to identify a PIN and put someone into it.
Okay. Okay,
Well, can I push-
yes?
When I heard this, I wasn't quite sure what work was involved in doing this. I mean, you're not dealing with it on a kid-by-kid basis. This is just having the departments work together to make the law work, I mean, unless I'm missing something. It strikes me as like kind of what,
No, I believe the intent is that there's going to be a designated individual to make sure all the communications are happening and all the relationships are.
I understand that, but it seems to me like a little bit of one person's job. It doesn't strike me as, it's kind of what the governor's office does, what deputy chiefs of staff do like all the time, is make sure that departments are working together. I'm skeptical that it requires a full-time person.
Well, and I would add, if I may, one of the functions of the Children's Cabinet as of late is to sort of be a facilitator for these kinds of discussions and make sure we're coordinating among child-serving agencies. And so to a large extent, I think you could argue that they are currently sort of filling this purpose to a degree.
Well, maybe we should tell them to do it. I mean, it's not that I don't want to hire more state workers, which we can't do anyway, because nobody wants, we have a workforce
We're
shortage.
not necessarily saying that.
Well, yeah, it doesn't necessarily say that. I
Well,
mean, it
they're
could.
designating somebody.
Yeah,
So that's all it is, okay,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
yeah, it could just be identifying the person who's
Gotcha,
currently
okay,
doing it.
thank you.
Okay,
Bottom of handwritten page 8, starting line 25, this is new change. This is striking the fund. As introduced, there was a penalty provision that would go into the fund. That was taken out by the House, so there's no longer a designated funding source, and CHRC had also expressed concern about having to administer it. So that goes on to the bottom of page, or onto page 9, down to line 19. Page 9, starting at line 20, this is language that the House had already struck. That carries on to page 10, line 24. Page 10, starting at line 26, this is a new change. This is just striking the references to the fund. It's technical. It's not needed since there's no fund. On page 11, starting at line 7, this is the task force with all the membership to be appointed to further review the issue. There are no changes to this language. This carries on over to page handwritten 13, line 10. It's all of the underlying language, and this
Yep.
is additions the House made.
yep,
Handwritten page 13, this new section 3, this is intent language, identifying there was some money in the budget. Dave's here to discuss more thoroughly, but there's $15 million already in the budget that was kind of identified to address this issue. And so this language here is just expressing the General Assembly's intent that that money be used to kind of help alleviate the issues that are going on here. And then the rest of the changes on the bottom of page 13 are just technical renumbering.
so David, was that money specific for these foster youth, or is it broader than that?
Yeah, it was added to in supplemental 4, it was a governor's initiative that, as I understand it, came out of the health department. It's to provide with its its Medicaid federal matching funds and state general funds, $7.5 million each, to increase the payment rates to RTCs by about 30% for these sort of specialized kind of placements that they're having trouble getting RTCs to create and accept kids for. And apparently the RTC's concern, understandably, is that these kids are very costly to serve and that the current reimbursement rates are not adequate to make it worth their while to take the kids. So it's an attempt to create more capacity in the state to serve these children who keep getting stuck in the hospital.
But it's limited to foster care?
He doesn't specifically say that in the supplemental, but that is the intent of the health department when they ask for that money.
Senator Sully?
Yes, thank you. I was just trying to find where that was in supplemental 4, you were saying for the 15 million. But I think there's also a 35 million additional to the beds in supplemental 5. And I saw that already, so it's a part of that supplemental. I was just wondering if I could find the other one, that's all.
I don't have supplemental 4 in front of me, so I don't recall the item number, but the,
I'm
Yes.
looking for it, I got it right here, and I just didn't know if you knew that, so,
sorry, I don't have the
Okay.
number off the top of my head.
thank you.
And to Dave's point, I think this language would, even though the budget has been wrapped up, I think this language would, again, expresses your intent on how to use that funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Senator?
We ready to go back to something earlier that we talked about?
Sure.
Okay, back to page 6, I guess it is. This was the payment rate issue. Would it make sense to tweak this language to basically say that somebody, and I'm open to who somebody is, but somebody should have responsibility for figuring out what the appropriate payment rate is? If we can't figure it out ourselves, it sounds like it's a little loosey-goosey.
I mean, one option would be to add that to part of the task force's charge.
Okay, I'm flexible. And what's the timing on the task force?
The report is supposed to be submitted on or before December 31st, 2022.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Why don't we do that?
Okay, everybody? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the report, I know we talked about it yesterday, but is this going to be kind of a soup to nuts assessment of the breakdowns in the system? Is that our intention?
I don't think it was the intention to start with on that, though.
But I would think, we all think it's needed.
Yeah.
So bottom of page 12, starting at line 17, on to page 13, line 7, those are the charges for the task force.
Okay. Thank you.
So for the payment issue on the task force, I guess would be something like, make recommendations regarding, payment rates and procedures from the department to hospitals and other facilities for stays in excess of the medical necessity. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
I would think my colleagues at the Department of Health would perhaps have an opinion on that, since
I didn't
they,
hear that. They would have what?
an opinion on, right, since they would control the billing and know more about billing for Medicaid rates on that piece.
You have as members of the task force, the Department of Health and the Interagency
Yeah.
Rate Committee, so I think we're,
Yeah, you obviously want to hear from the department. Yeah. Senator Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to page 6 again, and I guess I'd like to know, I mean, we're going to set a rate, or the task force is going to set a rate, but, you know, the prevailing, I know it's scratched out, but the prevailing Medicaid rate, could somebody answer the question on what that is?
That's why it was stricken.
I mean, I know,
Yeah,
but I
nobody-
mean, do we have any idea what has been paid?
Nobody was clear on what that terminology meant.
Okay. paid?
Senator Jackson, Mr. Vice Chair, I did get some information on what the 2020 administrative rates were for hospitals, if that would be helpful. So in 2020, it was $462.52 per day if awaiting placement in an RTC in a specialty psychiatric hospital, and $275.15 per day if they were in any other kind of acute care facility.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Senator Quarterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just following up on some of the conversation from yesterday and into today of, kind of the two issues were, as we talked about, were the, the payment, which has been discussed here a lot, but then obviously just the bed space. And it seems like we're that there's money available that we're gonna, put towards the bed. And I guess just my own basic understanding is, I apologize, like, how do you create more beds? How does the department, what does that look like? Like, when we say we need more beds, I mean, what is that? Are we, like,
Certificate of need.
what is that exactly? Like, how does that happen? Because that seems to be, that's the biggest issue, is we can't get the kids to bed, so
Yeah.
how do we create more beds?
So I'm happy to answer that. So as far as the creation of beds, the Department of Human Services doesn't license the type of beds that many of these children need. That would be the Department of Health. And even within this issue of whether or not we have a physical bed, it's actually a little more nuanced than that, I would say, because sometimes it is the case where a provider may have an empty bed, but what they don't have is the therapeutic programming, staffing, resources for that child's specific behaviors. And so they may have an open bed, but they may not have an open bed or a program that's suitable for a sex trafficking survivor, for example.
So, Mr. Chair. So then back to that again, so we have the money in place, so then is the department confident enough that they would be able to, I guess, partner with those other agencies or providers to, again, to create those beds? Because again, to me, the whole thing is, if we don't have the beds, then we're just kind of spinning here.
Are those beds, certificate of need beds?
Yes, for residential treatment centers, you do need a
Right,
con.
so you're familiar with that, Senator?
Yeah.
So it's a whole process to add new beds, which is a whole nother story.
Right, and to answer your question, Senator Quarterman, I think part of what this body has tried to do with the budget is offer incentives for the provider community to build out those services.
Thank you.
I didn't thought of the certificate of need issue until the chairman raised it. Obviously, this is a case of need. And the certificate of need process, to my vague understanding, is a complicated one. Would there be value in this bill in putting in some kind of fast-track procedure or something to deal with this? Or to raise that in some way, or have the work group study that or something, if that is potentially a limitation?
Maybe look at it. I don't want to,
Okay.
I don't want to mess with that in the final hours of our session here.
Okay, well, maybe add it to the work.
But adding it to the work group might not, can you think of how you might do that, Philip?
I'm sorry, I was trying to update. What was that?
So, one potential problem in all of this may be adding beds and meet the speed in which, or the ability in which to add beds through the certificate of need process, that be looked at as whether it seems like it's appropriate, needs to be tweaked.
So page 12, under the task force duties, paragraph 2, ascertain the current shortages for appropriate placement settings in the state. Paragraph 3, assess shortfalls in supportive services. Paragraph 5, Roman 1, make recommendations on resources needed to fill gaps in placement services. Going on to page 13, a plan to develop needed resources and services. So I don't know if that covers what.
I don't think it does.
Well, I mean, I think Senator wants
So,
some reference
something
to
to-
certificate of need, and the
Ex-
process,
Expedite approval of additional
the
services?
potential for something like that.
Any changes needed in CON to deal with this issue? Something like that. Look
Sure.
at that.
Sure.
Broader, so it's
Broader in what sense?
than CON, so just any changes needed to,
No, I think,
to speed up the approval process for,
Yeah,
How are you?
that's,
Senator Solling?
Knowing we have an overall problem of placement, and I know that it's not just in-state, it's out-state, that we try to find, are we trying to remedy more, I know overall, but how we can have more in-state and really take care of them here in placement? Because I know, like, I can't remember the proper language or the wording, but how the wait time, it was just overwhelming. And we got the numbers for the past 2 years, but and I know the overall thing of what we're looking at is placement. So are we looking more than anything in-state? Because I know at times we are going out of state.
yeah, so that's a great question, and the issue of out-of-state placements is very much the other side of this hospital overstays coin, and it has a very lengthy history, but several years ago, we had many, many more children in out-of-state placements. We probably reduced our number of out-of-state placements by 2/3 or more, and have brought many of our children back home, which I think is also part of what has contributed to this shortage, right? We previously had more out-of-state resources. We limited that pool of resources by bringing kids home. And so the number of out-of-state placements has gone down significantly.
I just think it's a, like I say, Mother, it worries, I guess, the parent that if they do need the help, that if they have to go out of state, that's more of a trouble, even though you want to do the best for that child. But I think if we could possibly work in-state, trying to, our best to see what we could do as close as possible, I think that would help that out. But I know more than anything, the problem is just trying to get in place, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Eckert?
Thank you very much. I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, cutting to the chase, the issue is we need more facilities. And I don't, why couldn't we just direct the children's cabinet to do that? I mean, there are existing providers out there, and it would be interesting to know, and there are facilities out there that are going to be decommissioned or whatever that already are, I mean, Upper Shores on the list of things to be decommissioned, and there are other places around the state, and I just don't understand why we just don't get the facilities, the services that we need, just rather than creating a work group that's going to look at it, that's going to come back, and it just kind of kicks the can down the road when we know we need expanded services. I would just direct the Children's Cabinet to tell us, come up with a plan. Thank you.
I don't disagree with you. I think finding ourselves in this place at the end of session with probably a lot of complicated questions. I don't want to, what my gut is, and I agree with you about not kicking the can down the road, but I mean, the report is due in December. I think, it's interesting on some level that we were assigned this bill, and that we probably should have had, and it was a dual side with JPI. It's a curiosity to me why it wasn't maybe even finance that got this, and I feel like we're working on a lot of policy components. There are obviously financial components, but it strikes me that maybe knowing that we're getting this report in December, assuming we pass this bill, that we put together a little group of maybe the 3 committees even, just a couple people, and really dig in and try to plan to have something ready. When's this report due? December?
End of the calendar year.
In the calendar year. I mean, it's still not a lot to get ready for the next session, but it seems to me that maybe we try to offer putting a group together in early January, so maybe we can come up with something in the first month that can actually get into a piece of legislation that doesn't end up coming over as a non-cross-filed bill, and we have a little better time to deal with some of the tougher issues. Senator?
I do know that there are elements of this in the behavioral health plan. I know Dr. Jones and her group had worked on this. I also believe there are foster care groups that had been working through the years on this. It just would be interesting to do an inventory of all the groups and organizations who have been working on this and pull that together, because it may be that there is a plan, but it just hasn't been collated or pulled together and then given some feet and some financing to move forward.
Senator Alford?
I don't want to add more to the task force's work, but I think maybe an easy, low-hanging fruit would be to recommend how to coordinate between DHS and MDH a little better. It just feels a little bit like we might have a right-hand, left-hand situation, and if the task force can make recommendations on greater collaboration and coordination between those two agencies, I think that would be helpful. And if possible, it feels like maybe this is a place where early intervention could go a very long way if the state, identify ways the state could do a better job at that early intervention for these kids and these families before they meet the need to actually be entered into a hospital.
Yes, Senator?
Yeah, and I would just add to Senator Alfred's comment that part of this bill that pertains to JPR, it seems like the communication coordination with those elements of it need to be addressed as well.
Okay.
Is that an addition?
Can you come up with something?
Can you, okay.
Senator?
Thank you very much. And I think if you look in the law, and I can't remember what chapter or title it is, under the Children's Cabinet, and if you look at what their charge is, I think you will find that this fits into this. I know I had pulled together the departments, I think it was maybe a couple of years ago, to really get that group going and be consistent with what is already in the law, or take it out of the law and disband it. And they were, what I found out is those departments had been meeting together. So that's why I wondered if some kind of a charge or including that in the bill then reinforces that whole element of the Children's Cabinet.
Yeah, and if
you
I.
might be able to speak to that.
Yes, thank you. So just as some additional historical context on this bill, so this bill was introduced in 2020 as HB 1382. And since that time, you're absolutely correct, Senator, the Children's Cabinet has convened and put together a hospital overstays plan that, like I said, involves all child-serving agencies, because in addition to DHS and MDH, there are small parts of this that are owned by, DJS and others. Insofar as sometimes we have co-committed youth, et cetera. And so this is something the administration has been working on for a couple of years. And I know that if the committee were interested, there is a plan that we'd be happy to share with you. But I think you're right, Senator Eckert, to the extent that perhaps some of the other external stakeholders need to be brought in and part of that conversation, maybe there's room to have that conversation as well.
So a lot of times plans are developed, and ultimately what they may require are not, there isn't the funding there for them. Or sometimes plans are developed conceptually believing you only have X amount of funding for them. And so I don't know how that plan has been developed, but how it would be done, I guess what I believe our committee is saying, we think this is important enough that we try to figure it out regardless of what the funding issues are. And then it'll be up to us to figure out that problem. But I don't know how that plan looks, and whether it was built from one perspective or another. Do you have any sense of that?
So there's several different pieces. Some of it has to do with targeted rate setting for Medicaid reimbursements and improving those rates for certain services and the population of children we're talking about. Some of it has to do with streamlining certain Medicaid waivers. There's multiple different approaches that are all combined within the larger plan.
Right, and again, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I think it's a tricky question, quite frankly. But to me, it's important to know whether you're planning based on a sense of scarcity, or you're planning for what you really want to ultimately accomplish. And it's two different ways of thinking of things. And maybe we can further have those conversations as we move on. Senator?
And just a quick question, is the study provision in the redraft, was that in the original bill, or did we add that?
Which piece are you talking about?
The work group?
The work group was in the bill as introduced.
Okay, I just wanted,
The underlying provisions were added by the House.
I understand, that was all, I wasn't clear, thank you.
Okay, further, Senator Jackson.
Yes, there's a component in the bill that speaks about emergency room placement. But all these kids aren't in emergency rooms. They're in rooms, and the hospital has rooms available. So I just think we need to make sure that we're not just focusing on these folks being left in emergency rooms. They're also left in other areas of the hospital. So
I think that's,
I think it's in F1. Philip, you know what I'm talking about?
What page?
I think Ms. Dorian has something to add too.
Page 12, line 18.
Yeah, and it's just, the phrasing is a little bit weird, because they're not being placed in emergency rooms, some of them are ending up in emergency rooms. For a lot of children, the emergency department is the entry point to care, to the foster care system. For some of them, some come in, they are not in the system yet, and then, circumstances occur and they, end up in the system. But Senator Jackson, you are exactly right. It's not just an emergency department issue. It's inpatient units throughout the hospitals, both acute care facilities and specialty psychiatric hospitals.
Yeah, so if we could, Philip, we could work on that language.
Is that a clarification, or is it assumed somewhere else? Or
Just clarification on.
Do you want to just use the same terminology that you see in line 25 in hospitals, emergency facilities, and inpatient facilities?
Yes, thank you.
great.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, any other comments? So we have the bill before us as the House amended it, and then as we have heard a number of amendments.
So you have your reprint plus, let me go through the changes you made. The reprint before you plus striking 6 and 7
Right.
on handwritten page 7. Page 12, line 18, instead of emergency departments, we'll use the consistent terminology, hospitals, emergency facilities, and inpatient facilities. And then on page 13, adding to the charge of the task force, make recommendations on payment rates and payment procedures for payments by the Department of Health and Department of Human Services to a hospital, emergency facility, or an inpatient facility for admission of a child beyond medical necessity. Changes to the approval process for out-of-home placement services in the state with the goal of enhancing service capacity. And then Senator Elfreth, was yours something along the lines of recommendations for improvements to the coordination between the Department of Health, Department of Human Services, and other relevant units of state and local government to reduce the number of children and length of stays beyond medical necessity. I think that's everything I have from this voting session.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make sure that we captured, and maybe it is in your last statement, Philip, some of the concerns that were raised by our colleague from JPR and some of the opposition or information letters we had from the Attorney General and the Maryland Judiciary, to at least envelop them in the communication. So are they the, is that what you were referencing
Well,
when you said
the striking of the liability shield, I know, is something that was raised, I believe, by the Attorney General.
Yeah, there were a
So
couple.
you've stricken that. You have the clarifying change on page 3, but page 3 and the top of page 4 are, I think, more in JPR's jurisdiction, and I don't know what their position is gonna be on these changes to the process. I've been told that the change on page 3 in H1 is generally codifying the current practice, which is the standard under Health General for involuntary admissions. I'm not familiar with the Child or Native Assistance procedures, and so JPR may have some concerns or a position on that. And then the paragraph 2 is new process that, they'll weigh in on.
Okay, we'll leave that to them then. All righty, thank you.
Very good.
Can I move favorable as amended?
You certainly can.
I move favorable as amended.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone, for participating. Roman, apartments, hospitals, everyone, thank you.
You are most welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Guy,
Yes.
my little friend over there.
Yes, Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that, we took a pretty difficult issue with a difficult problem, and we moved the ball forward. I just think we should be proud of the work that we did, but more proud of when we help people. Thank you.
We need to take a quick discussion on the capital budget. Past third reader, right? So we'll get that tomorrow.
Is that,
Actually have a message now as to whether you'd like to concur or not concur.
We do have a message.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mr.
Senator Zucker?
Yeah, so just so you know, everything that we sent over to the House was protected. We also wanted to make sure that we try to expedite the process, so we didn't necessarily do a conference committee, but what we did was we made sure that we sent over everything else that we may have missed on the Senate side in terms of statewide priorities and local priorities, and they adopted all that. So the House bill really is the Senate bill as well, and I would move to concur with the House actions.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, great work, great work. Hell of a lot of work. And to get through all that, it was pretty extraordinary. Good job, everyone, particularly the chairman.
Here, here.
Okay, let's see, what else we want to do?
Do bingo machines?
No.
Now we're gonna play bingo.
Yeah, we are gonna do that. All right. How does 153 look? Do we have any sense on the cost on that yet? Can we guess at all reasonably?
No.
No. I mean, conceptually, go ahead, I'm sorry, you tell us what the bill is.
That's okay, I don't know if you want me to catch them up with,
Yeah,
So
please.
the bill came in, and basically for the homeowner's property tax credit in terms of meeting the gross income requirement, which is the $60,000 that you've seen in some other bills, This bill, as it came in, would have reduced any expenses for medical care, continuing care, assisted living program, or nursing homes. The sponsor presented B&T with an amendment to only subtract the expenses for assisted living and nursing home. As it originally came in, there was an estimate of, I believe, a $15 million fiscal note cost plus, let's see, some SDAT administrative expenses of a little less than $800,000 for 2023. So I tried to, so we talked to SDAT about this amendment and to what degree would it reduce the $15 million cost, and basically, we don't know. I think common sense is that it would reduce it, but we have no idea how to put a number to it. But it would reduce the administrative cost that the department was able to confirm. It would reduce it by half.
You said reduced by half?
The administrative cost, but not the 15 million part.
Okay. I mean, I love to figure this one out. I know there are people out there who aren't living in their homes. This is essentially what's happening, right? They're in other facilities, and they're paying significant property tax bills that they otherwise, if they had been, in their homes because they weren't in assisted living or some other form, right? Yeah. It's like they're paying to live in two different places, unfortunately. I'd love to figure this one out, but I'm not sure that we've got enough info to do it, unless somebody else has some ideas.
Is this enabling, or is this mandatory?
This would be changing current law for everybody.
I wonder if we could make it enabling and let folks figure it out at the local level.
There is on the books.
This is our, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there is on the books already, localities are able to do additional homeowners tax credits
Oh, I
if
see,
they
I
want
see.
to.
I think
Plus, you all have just passed another bill that kind of touched on this, that has actually made its way through both chambers, allowing an individual, although not completely on point with this, they can deduct expenses for hardships, which does include medical expenses, for purposes of meeting the $60,000 income threshold.
If we could, this is one that I'd like to get maybe some more info on over the summer, personally. I think it's a great cause to work on. I think it's the right thing to do. But it's just a little, too many uncertainties, unfortunately. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Just hold. Yep,
Yeah, we might do a summer study.
that's right, that's right.
There you go.
The thing about summer study is that who's gonna wanna do that
No,
this summer?
See, he loves summer study.
I was kidding, I was kidding.
Yeah.
I was kidding, I have a summer study
Yeah.
plan myself, it involves running in the primary.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we would hope to get out of this, if we were to look at it over some period of time,
The fall study,
right, is, late fall.
late fall, winter study,
Yeah, winter study, yeah, yeah, is how to really
do it.
tease out the costs of this, so. All right, we've got to move to concur on 114.
Yep, Senate Bill 114, you'll recall this is the one on the false claims and the AGs being able to keep in the special funds where the false claim came from. You'll recall that what you all had to do on the House bill is just a technical amendment on the purpose paragraph. And that is what the House did to the Senate bill, so they are now matching.
Who's favorable?
Second.
Aye. All those in favor?
Favor? Aye. Hey, how would you like to be recorded, Mr. Chair?
Aye.
That was because,
That was 114, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to 513.
Okay, you guys are secondary on this, and there was no cross-file. So House Bill 513 out of EHE, which I will just say, other than 2 excused absences, was unanimous, favorable with amendment. You have a reprint momentarily, once we get it passed out here. So as it initially came in, basically it dealt with establishing an infant and early childhood mental health support services program within MSDE. So it's all new language. Essentially, the purpose of the program is to promote positive mental and behavioral health practices for young children who may have developmental, social, emotional, or behavior issues. The idea is that the program would refer children and families in need of intensive services to appropriate clinics or programs, provide coaching, training to teachers and caregivers, building partnerships with community resources, which would include things like Judy Centers, Patty Centers, Head Starts, Infants and Toddlers Program, and then also awarding grants. So now that you have the reprint, the things that are in italicized are what EHE is projecting to add. First of all, it just would clarify how to accept children for enrollment. That's on bill page 3. It looks like this came from the House. There was a mandate of initially $6 million for fiscal '24, and each year thereafter, that was reduced to $3 million. And so that would be $3 million worth of grants for these purposes.
Is, about being in the mandate, being in blueprint?
Yes, I wondered about the blueprint, but I also know that, remember last year and the year before, we put a lot of additional money into infant and toddlers program, and I just wondered if that fit with this. And was it already being addressed? Because there was quite an infusion of funds in the infants and toddlers program.
I'd have to get back to you on that. The fiscal note doesn't happen to have the specifics on that. I mean, generally speaking, yes, the blueprint expanded a lot of these centers. To me, this is striking me as a grant to get to hook people up with those centers for the services. But I can look further at other infants and toddlers funding and see what's going on there.
Thank you.
Sounds like, sounds like we might hold that. Is that what you're asking for, Senator Eckert? Okay. $942.
House Bill 942 is the cross-file of Senate Bill 792. This dealt with the OTB, saying that if you're zoned to be a VLT facility, electronic bingo facility, or a sports wagering facility, you don't need additional zoning to be an OTB. Allows the Jockey Club employees to also sell sports wagering. They can operate both the sports wagering kiosks and the racing kiosks, and then also authorizes those kiosks to offer both horse racing wagering and sports wagering. Same posture as the Senate bill.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And I have a concurrence, if you want to take it up. Well,
Sure.
While we're here. House Bill 1055, the House has asked you to recede from the amendments. This is the bill that would, the cheese buses. This is the Baltimore, yes, I think everybody remembers the issue. The Senate bill, or the Senate put a sunset on the bill. The House does not want the sunset, so they sent it back without the sunset, asking the Senate to recede from the amendments.
Senator McCray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we just, I gotta take some time to think about this, if we can hold it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes?
I'd be happy to hold it and think about it, but I don't remember the bill. Could we, everyone who remembers, maybe someone could remind me?
So the bill,
Cheese buses?
Cheese buses? It might have been out.
the bill allows, or requires the Maryland Transit Administration to provide free ridership to Baltimore City school students and Baltimore City Youth Program participants.
Gotcha.
During
Now I got it.
certain hours.
It was the cheese bus thing that got it. Thank you.
Okay, hold that. 1403.
I think you did that one right before.
We
the-
did?
Do it again.
Yep.
Oh, we did, didn't we? That's a good one.
Yeah, let's do it again.
That's a crossfire, isn't it? Is it not?
Senator Zucker likes that one. Uh, 1039.
Alrighty. House Bill 1039. This is a crossfile to Senate Bill 860. This has to do with the agrivoltaics community solar one. So as you guys passed it out, it does not match their bill as it came over to you. Just need to find the right version.
Didn't have the solar.
Yep, that's still the
Didn't
Senate
have
bill.
the school
So as
solar.
as it left the Senate, a floor amendment was adopted to add schools. The House bill, they actually moved favorable, so they didn't do any amendments. The other amendment that you all did is basically just clarifying for purposes of eligibility that it's prospective. And I was asked to prepare a reprint, which, to make it match the Senate bill, but without the schools in it. So matching how this committee passed it.
Senator McCray, you were wanting to speak on this?
Obviously, the environment is very, very important. I have an environmental issue right there in the House of Delegates that's been taking some time to get forward. So I wanted to hold this bill also, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes? Is that,
Mind lands is removed from the bill.
I think you're on the wrong one.
Vineland is removed from that bill.
That was 1039.
1039. Oh, I was
Okay.
wondering. Okay, sorry.
All right, 1039, so what we're doing, get them in the position where we have that, is there, did you say a technical amendment that we had?
Yeah, it was both, as it left this committee, it was both taking mined lands out of the definition of bounds fields,
Oh, right,
as well as, yes, clarifying the applicability of it to prospective in terms of when
right,
the equipment
but
being brought in
but-
service.
taking off, well, this one doesn't have it, right?
As it came over to you, it did not have it.
Okay. So they're gonna presumably take off the West Amendment.
Yes. And he understands that.
Okay. Correct?
The bill is actually still in rules, so I don't know what the
Yeah,
House
yeah.
is gonna do with it.
Okay. Okay. Everyone understand where we are on this?
Yep.
Put it in the Senate position minus the floor amendment. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Senator King. And did we do 1349 yet?
No. Okay, so this one just came out of rules on your side. As a reminder, this is the one, and it did have an interaction with the budget. It would have provided, if funding weren't provided in 2023, $1,000 bonuses for various non-certificated education support professionals. So just working from the House Bill third reader version on your computer. Basically, the House struck references to fiscal '23 since there was a supplemental budget that brought in $88 million for this purpose. They also redefined who these people are to match what the Senate bill did in terms of defining them to mean part of certain bargaining units. And then for fiscal '24, it did carry forward with the idea to provide a $500 bonus in fiscal '24, and then the House did add a collection of data and a reporting requirement on page 4 of the bill.
Okay.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed? That was yours, Senator Zucker, right?
It does, I believe, yes.
It does. Okay. I think, yep, that was the one that Senator McRae was referring to.
Oh.
Okay, I think that's it, unless you guys have anything else for us. No?
Just what was on the list.
Right. Okay. All right, let's see, what's tomorrow?
Thursday.
Oh, can I make a correction? I just heard from my counterpart on House Bill 513.
Yeah.
It's, so it's apparently codifying an existing program. I am still digging to see if it's currently funded at 3 million or what the funding is, but it's, the program itself is being codified in this bill.
Gotcha. Yeah, so if it's already being funded, then we should be all right.
Yeah, I'll double check all that.
I'm sure there will be. Thursday, 10 o'clock. Well, just stay tuned, is the answer.
We're getting an email tonight for the meeting at 8:30 in the morning?
It wouldn't be 8:30, it might be 9, maybe.
Really?
I don't want it to be, but I'll be working hard not to be. Okay?